Captain Sarah Chen stepped off the transport shuttle onto the gleaming deck of Nexus Station, humanity's first diplomatic outpost in the Galactic Coalition. The massive space station orbited the neutral world of Kepler Prime, serving as a meeting point for dozens of alien species. Sarah carried herself with quiet confidence, but her heart raced with excitement. Today marked humanity's formal introduction to the greater galactic community. The station's main concourse stretched before her like a vast cathedral of chrome and crystal. Beings from across the galaxy moved through the space with practiced efficiency. Tall, graceful Etherians glided past on gossamer wings, their translucent skin shimmering with internal light. Stocky Chronari merchants haggled in their grinding, metallic language, while their forearms gestured wildly. Serpentine Zephyrians slithered between the crowds, their scales catching the artificial sunlight streaming through the dome overhead. Dr. Marcus Webb, humanity's lead xenobiologist, walked beside Sarah, his eyes wide with wonder. Behind them followed Lieutenant Jake Morrison and Specialist Lisa Park, both trying to maintain professional composure while taking in the incredible diversity of life around them. Their Etherian escort, Ambassador Veltar, moved ahead with fluid grace. His melodic voice carried easily over the ambient noise of the station. "The Coalition Council eagerly awaits your species presentation, Captain Chen. However, I must warn you that many member species remain skeptical about humanity's potential contributions to our alliance." Sarah nodded diplomatically. "We understand, Ambassador. Humans are newcomers here. We hope to prove our worth through cooperation and friendship." Veltar's feathery antennae twitched in what Sarah had learned was amusement. "Friendship is a concept many species struggle with, Captain. The galaxy can be a harsh place." As they walked deeper into the station, Sarah noticed something troubling. Despite the crowds, there was an underlying tension in the air. Groups of different species kept careful distances from each other. Conversations were formal, businesslike. Even the Etherians, known for their peaceful nature, seemed guarded around other species. Their destination was the biological research wing, where humanity would demonstrate their technological capabilities and biological knowledge. As they approached the secured entrance, alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in pulsing red. Veltar's skin shifted to a pale blue color, which Sarah recognized as distress. "Emergency protocols are activating. We must seek shelter immediately." Through the station's communication system, an authoritative voice announced in the common galactic language, "Alert! Containment breach in Research Lab 7. All personnel evacuate sectors 12 through 15. Military units respond immediately. The Void Stalker has escaped containment." The effect on the alien crowds was immediate and dramatic. Beings who had moments before moved with casual confidence now fled in barely controlled panic. The Chronari merchants abandoned their goods and scrambled toward exits on all four limbs. Etherians took flight, streaming toward the upper levels like panicked birds. Even the imposing Zephyrians, each one over 3 meters long, coiled themselves into defensive positions against the walls. "What's a Void Stalker?" Dr. Webb asked, but his question was lost in the chaos. Ambassador Veltar was backing away rapidly, his skin now a deep purple with fear. "You must come with me immediately. The Void Stalker is one of the most dangerous predators known to the galaxy. They were studying it in the research labs, but if it has escaped..." His voice trailed off as he began moving toward an evacuation route, but the humans weren't following. Instead, they stood together, watching as a sleek black shape emerged from a ventilation grate high above them. The creature was unlike anything they had ever seen. About the size of a large dog, it moved with impossible fluidity, its form seeming to shift and flow like living shadow. 6 limbs ended in razor-sharp claws that could apparently cut through metal based on how easily it had emerged from the station's infrastructure. Most unsettling were its eyes, deep purple orbs that seemed to contain swirling galaxies within them. The Void Stalker dropped silently to the deck about 50 meters away. Every alien in sight either fled faster or froze in terror. The creature's head swept back and forth, those cosmic eyes taking in its surroundings. When its gaze fell upon a group of Chronari younglings who had become separated from their elders in the panic, it began stalking toward them with predatory intent. That's when Captain Chen did something that shocked every alien witness. She stepped forward. "Easy there, beautiful," Sarah said softly, her voice carrying the same gentle tone she had once used with frightened animals back on Earth. "You're confused, aren't you? This place is loud and strange. I bet you just want to find somewhere quiet and safe." The Void Stalker's head snapped toward her, those galaxy-filled eyes focusing on the approaching human. Every alien who could see what was happening felt a chill of absolute terror. Void Stalkers were known to be completely feral, attacking any living being on sight. They were apex predators from the dark regions between stars, and this one had already killed 3 researchers during its initial capture. But Sarah continued walking forward, her movements slow and non-threatening. She kept her voice low and soothing. "I know you're scared. New places are frightening. But look at me. Not them. I'm not afraid of you." The creature tilted its head, a very dog-like gesture that seemed completely at odds with its fearsome reputation. Its claws retracted slightly. Dr. Webb, recognizing what Sarah was doing, began speaking quietly to the others. "She's using animal psychology. Basic trust-building techniques. But this is insane. That thing could tear her apart." Lieutenant Morrison had his hand near his sidearm, but he held his position. He had served with Captain Chen long enough to trust her judgment, even in situations that seemed utterly impossible. Sarah was now within 10 meters of the Void Stalker. She crouched down slowly, making herself appear smaller and less threatening. "That's it. You can sense that, you know harm. Can't you? I think you're magnificent. Those eyes of yours are beautiful." The creature took a tentative step toward her. Around them, the alien crowd was completely silent, watching in absolute disbelief. Ambassador Veltar was making urgent gestures, trying to communicate with station security to intervene. But the humans were too close to the creature for weapons to be safely used. "You're not evil," Sarah continued, extending one hand palm up. "You're just lost. I bet you have feelings just like any other creature. Are you lonely? I would be. Trapped in a lab away from everything familiar." The Void Stalker approached her hand cautiously. When it was close enough, Sarah could see that its seemingly solid form was actually composed of thousands of tiny particles that moved like living dark matter. The creature sniffed her hand with what appeared to be nostrils, though they might have been something else entirely. Then it did something that caused audible gasps from every alien observer. It nuzzled her palm gently, like an affectionate cat. "There you are," Sarah whispered, slowly moving to stroke the creature's head. Her hand passed through the shadow-like substance, but somehow she could still make contact with something solid beneath. The Void Stalker's form became more stable under her touch, solidifying as if her presence was grounding it to reality. The creature made a sound unlike anything it had produced before. A soft, almost musical humming that resonated through the station's deck plating. It was a sound of contentment. Dr. Webb was frantically taking readings with his portable scanner. "This is impossible," he muttered. "The creature's stress indicators are dropping rapidly. Its electromagnetic field is stabilizing. It's actually becoming calmer." Sarah continued to pet the Void Stalker, and the creature responded by moving closer, eventually settling down beside her like a massive, ethereal dog. The transformation was complete when it rolled partially onto its back, exposing what might have been its belly, seeking more attention. "Who's a good cosmic horror?" Sarah said in a baby talk voice that would have been ridiculous in any other context. "You are. You're just a big, scary-looking sweetheart, aren't you?" The Void Stalker's humming intensified, and its form began to shimmer with colors that hadn't been there before. Deep blues and purples that matched its eyes. Ambassador Veltar approached cautiously, his skin cycling through colors that indicated profound confusion. "Captain Chen. What? How are you doing this?" Void Stalkers have never been successfully domesticated. They attack anything that comes near them. The research team lost 3 members attempting exactly what you just accomplished. Sarah looked up from where she was, now scratching behind what might have been the creature's ears. "Different approach, I suppose. We humans have been domesticating animals for thousands of years. The key is showing them that you're not a threat. that you care about their well-being. But this creature is not from your world, Veltar protested. Your species has never encountered anything like it. How could your techniques possibly work? Ache. Lieutenant Morrison stepped forward with a slight grin. With respect, Ambassador, you haven't seen the captain with difficult animals before. She once calmed down an entire pack of territorial wolves, using nothing but patience and dog treats. This is no mere wolf, Lieutenant, Veltar replied. No, Sarah agreed, continuing to pet the now peaceful Void Stalker. This is far more intelligent. I can see it in those eyes. You understand every word we're saying, don't you? Beautiful? The creature's humming changed pitch, almost as if it were attempting to respond. Dr. Webb was reviewing his scanner data with increasing excitement. Captain! The creature's brain activity is showing patterns I've never seen before. It's not just responding to you, it's actively choosing to trust you. The psychological barriers that make it attack other species aren't triggering with humans. Other aliens began to approach cautiously. A small group of Chronari researchers, including the younglings who had been the creature's initial target, crept closer under heavy guard. The Void Stalker noticed them and tensed slightly, but Sarah's continued stroking kept it calm. Easy, Sarah murmured to the creature. They're friends. They were trying to learn about you, not hurt you. One of the Chronari younglings, barely knee-high to Sarah, pointed at the Void Stalker with one of its forearms and said something in its native language. Ambassador Veltar translated, "The young one asks if the creature is now safe to approach." Sarah looked down at her new friend thoughtfully. What do you think? Gorgeous? Are you ready to make some other friends? The Void Stalker raised its head and looked directly at the Chronari younglings. Its form stabilized further, becoming almost solid. Then it made its humming sound again, but softer, less threatening. I think that's a yes, Sarah said. Under Sarah's guidance, the Chronari younglings were allowed to approach slowly. The Void Stalker remained calm as they gently touched its now solid form, their forearms moving with careful reverence. Soon, the creature was purring contentedly as a group of young aliens petted it with the same wonder that human children might show meeting a friendly dog. Word of the incident spread throughout Nexus Station with lightning speed. Within hours, representatives from dozens of species were requesting audiences with the human delegation. The creature that had been considered one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators was now peacefully resting in the research lab, allowing itself to be studied while Sarah or one of her team members stayed nearby. But the implications of what had happened were only beginning to sink in. As the day progressed, more stories emerged from around the galaxy. Human traders who had successfully negotiated with the notoriously hostile Void Pirates by treating them with respect rather than fear. Human colonists who had made friends with the massive, supposedly territorial storm beasts of Rigel VII. Human children who had turned deadly swarm creatures into playful pets through nothing more than patient kindness. Ambassador Veltar found Captain Chen in the research lab later that evening. She was sitting beside the Void Stalker, which had curled up like an enormous cat, its form now completely stable and shot through with gentle, warm colors. Captain, Veltar said, his skin showing colors of deep contemplation. I believe we need to discuss your species' unique capabilities with the Coalition Council. What you've demonstrated today. It challenges everything we thought we knew about interspecies relations. Sarah smiled, stroking the Void Stalker's head as it purred in its sleep. We're looking forward to those discussions, Ambassador. After all, the galaxy is a big place. There must be a lot of misunderstood creatures out there who could use a friend. As night fell over Nexus Station, the first day of humanity's integration into galactic society came to a close. But it was already clear that humans brought something to the galaxy that no other species possessed: the ability to see beauty and potential for friendship in even the most fearsome creatures. The Void Stalker, once considered an unstoppable killing machine, slept peacefully beside its new human friend, its form glowing with soft, contented light. And across the galaxy, other species were beginning to wonder what other dangerous creatures might simply be waiting for someone to show them kindness. The age of human diplomacy was about to begin, but it would be unlike any diplomacy the galaxy had ever seen before. 3 weeks after the Void Stalker incident, Nexus Station had transformed into an unprecedented center of interspecies cooperation. The Coalition Council had established the Department of Human-Creature Relations, with Captain Sarah Chen reluctantly accepting the role of chief liaison. Her team had expanded to include specialists from across Earth's animal psychology and veterinary fields, all eager to study this remarkable phenomenon. Dr. Webb had set up a comprehensive research facility in the station's former isolation wing. What was once used to quarantine dangerous specimens had become a peaceful sanctuary where humans worked alongside creatures that other species had deemed impossible to approach. The Void Stalker, now affectionately nicknamed Cosmos by the human team, had become something of a station mascot, often seen following Sarah through the corridors like an enormous, ethereal dog. But the peaceful atmosphere was about to be shattered by news from the galaxy's most dangerous frontier. High Admiral Zax Thor of the Draconian Empire burst into the Coalition Council chambers without following proper diplomatic protocols. The massive, dragon-like being's scales were dark with stress, and his forearms gestured frantically as he spoke. "The hive mind has broken through our defensive lines at the Kepler Nebula," he announced, his voice booming through the chamber. "They are advancing toward inhabited systems, with a fleet unlike anything we have seen before." The assembled representatives fell silent. The hive mind was the Coalition's greatest threat, a collective consciousness that consumed biological matter to expand its fleet of living ships. They had been contained beyond the galactic rim for over a century, but recent intelligence suggested they were preparing for a major offensive. Ambassador Veltar's skin shifted to deep purple with concern. "How many systems are in immediate danger?" 17 colonies with a combined population of 43 billion souls, Zax Thor replied grimly. But that is not the worst of it. The Hive has done something new. Instead of their usual bioships, they have enslaved creatures from the deep void, nightmare leviathans, shadow worms, and worse. They are using them as living weapons, and our conventional defenses are useless against them. Counselor Thren of the silicon-based Christarch spoke in harmonics that translated as bitter frustration. "These creatures cannot be reasoned with. They exist only to consume and destroy. Our only option is full military engagement." "Military engagement has failed," Zax Thor countered. "The 5th and 7th fleets engaged the lead elements 2 days ago. The creatures tore through our ships like they were made of paper. Weapons that should have destroyed them barely slowed them down. It's as if they feel no pain, no fear." That's when Captain Chen stood up from her observer's seat. "With respect, admirals, have you considered that these creatures might not be willing participants in this invasion?" The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Zax Thor's massive head swiveled toward her, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "What do you mean? Human?" Sarah walked to the center of the chamber, where holographic displays showed the advancing hive fleet. The images were terrifying. Massive organic ships, accompanied by creatures that defied description. Tentacled horrors the size of space stations. Serpentine beasts that coiled through the vacuum like living asteroids. And worse things that seemed to shift between dimensions. "Look at their movement patterns," Sarah said, manipulating the holographic display with practiced ease. "These creatures aren't attacking with tactical precision like the Hive's usual bioships. They're moving erratically, desperately. And here," she highlighted several readings, energy signatures showing massive stress responses. "These creatures are terrified." Art 10. Dr. Webb joined her, pulling up biological data on his tablet. "The captain's right. We've been analyzing the sensor data from the fleet engagements. The creature's biochemical emissions are consistent with extreme distress, not predatory aggression." "You're suggesting these nightmare creatures are victims?" Counselor Thren's harmonic translation carried notes of disbelief. "I'm suggesting they're being controlled against their will," Sarah replied firmly. "The hive mind doesn't just consume organic matter. It takes over nervous systems. These creatures aren't choosing to attack our colonies. They're being forced to." High Admiral Zax Thor leaned forward, his massive bulk casting shadows across the holographic display. "Even if your theory is correct, human, what difference does it make? They are still destroying our ships and threatening our civilians. It makes all the difference, Sarah said quietly. If they're victims, then maybe we can help them, instead of fighting them. The chamber fell silent. The idea of approaching the galaxy's most feared predators with kindness, instead of weapons, was so radical that many representatives couldn't even process it. Ambassador Veltar was the first to speak. Captain Chen, while your success with the Voidstalker was remarkable, these creatures are far more dangerous. And they are under the direct control of the hive mind. Are they? Sarah asked. Or is the hive mind's control incomplete? Think about it. If these creatures were perfectly controlled, why would they be showing stress responses? Why would their attack patterns be so erratic? She manipulated the display again, zooming in on detailed scans of individual creatures. Look at this shadow worm. See how its neural activity spikes every few minutes? That's not normal behavior. That's a consciousness fighting against foreign control. Dr. Webb nodded enthusiastically. It's like a neurological rebellion. The hive mind can force them to attack, but it can't completely suppress their natural instincts and personalities. This is madness, rumbled General Korth of the warrior caste. You speak of personalities in creatures that have devoured entire planets. Because they were forced to, Sarah replied. General, if someone took control of your mind and made you hurt innocent people, would that make you evil? Or would that make you another victim? The philosophical implications of her words rippled through the chamber. Species that had viewed these creatures as ultimate evil for centuries were being asked to consider them as fellow victims of the hive mind's cruelty. High Admiral Zax Thor studied the tactical displays with new perspective. Even if your theory has merit, human, how would you propose to help creatures that are actively attacking our forces? Sarah took a deep breath. She had been hoping someone would ask that question, but she also knew how insane her answer would sound. I want to try talking to them. The explosion of protests from the assembled representatives was immediate and overwhelming. Voices in dozens of languages filled the chamber with variations of impossible, suicidal, and completely mad. But Sarah pressed on. Not from a safe distance. Not through communication arrays. I want to get close enough to establish the same kind of connection I made with Cosmos. Captain, Ambassador Veltar said urgently, the Voidstalker was a single creature in a controlled environment. You're talking about approaching a hostile fleet in open space. I'm talking about approaching creatures that need help, Sarah corrected. And I won't be going alone. She gestured toward the observation gallery, where the rest of her team was watching the proceedings. Lieutenant Morrison stepped forward with military precision, while Dr. Webb and Specialist Park moved to flank Sarah. The human diplomatic team volunteers for this mission, Morrison announced formally. And the research team, Dr. Webb added. This is not a matter for volunteers, High Admiral Zax Thor declared. This is a military crisis, requiring military solutions. With respect, Admiral, Sarah replied. Military solutions haven't worked. The creatures destroyed 2 entire fleets. Maybe it's time to try something different. Counselor Thren's harmonics shifted to what the translation matrix indicated was contemplation. What exactly are you proposing? Human. Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes, or optical sensors, of representatives from dozens of species. Give me a ship, something fast and maneuverable, but not heavily armed. Let me take a small team to the leading edge of the Hive fleet. If I'm right, and these creatures are fighting the Hive's control, then maybe I can reach them. And if you're wrong, General Korth asked bluntly, then we'll have the same result as continuing with conventional warfare, Sarah replied. But if I'm right, we might be able to turn the Hive's own weapons against them. The debate that followed lasted for 6 hours. Military leaders argued for continued fleet engagement. Diplomatic representatives worried about the precedent of sending civilians into active combat zones. Scientists demanded more study and preparation time. But in the end, it was Ambassador Veltar who cast the deciding vote. The human team has demonstrated capabilities that no other species possesses, he said formally. Given the severity of the crisis, and the failure of conventional approaches. The Coalition Council approves this experimental mission. 2 days later, Sarah found herself aboard the scout ship, Harmony, a sleek vessel designed for speed and stealth rather than combat. The ship had been modified with the most advanced shielding and communication equipment the Coalition could provide, but everyone aboard knew that if the mission failed, their technological advantages would mean nothing. Her team consisted of Dr. Webb, Lieutenant Morrison, Specialist Park, and 3 additional xenobiologists who had volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission. They also had an unexpected passenger, Cosmos, the Void Stalker, who had refused to be separated from Sarah and had somehow communicated its desire to come along. Final systems check complete, announced their pilot, Commander Reese, a veteran of the Coalition Deep Space Service. We're approaching the edge of the conflict zone. Long-range sensors are picking up massive organic signatures ahead. Sarah sat in the observer's position, her hand resting on Cosmos's head as the Void Stalker materialized beside her chair. Through the ship's viewport, she could see the impossible sight of the Hive fleet in the distance. Living ships the size of cities moved through space alongside creatures that belonged in nightmares. There, Dr. Webb said, pointing to his sensor display. That shadow worm at the fleet's edge. It's showing the same neural patterns we discussed. Fight responses against external control. Sarah studied the creature through the ship's enhanced viewing systems. It was massive, easily 3 kilometers long, with a body that seemed to absorb light itself. Periodically, it would writhe and contort as if in pain, before resuming its steady advance toward Coalition space. That's our target, Sarah decided. Commander Reese, take us in slowly. No sudden movements. No aggressive postures. Captain, Lieutenant, Morrison said quietly, that thing could swallow our ship whole without even noticing. I know, Sarah replied. But look at it, Jake. Really look. It's suffering. As the Harmony approached, the shadow worm's massive head turned toward them. Its eyes were points of pure darkness in space, but as they drew closer, Sarah could see something else in those depths: intelligence, pain, and desperate hope. It sees us, Commander Reese reported. Energy readings are spiking. It's charging some kind of weapon system. No, Sarah said firmly. It's trying to communicate. The Hive is forcing it to prepare an attack, but look at how it's moving. It's fighting the command. The shadow worm's massive form convulsed. And for a moment, its weapon systems powered down. Then they charged again, this time more slowly, as if the creature was struggling against its own body. Sarah, Doctor, Webb said urgently, if we're going to try this, it has to be now. The creature is fighting harder against the Hive's control, but it won't be able to resist much longer. Sarah stood up, moving to the ship's communication station. She activated every broadcasting system they had, sending her voice across all frequencies toward the tortured creature. I know you can hear me, she said softly, using the same gentle tone that had calmed Cosmos weeks before. I know you don't want to hurt anyone. I can see you fighting against the thing that's controlling you. You're brave, and you're strong, and you're not alone anymore. The shadow worm's convulsions intensified. Its weapon systems powered up and down repeatedly, as if some internal battle was reaching a critical point. You're beautiful, Sarah continued, her voice carrying across the void. I know others fear you, but I can see your true nature. You're gentle, aren't you? The Hive has taken that gentleness and turned it into a weapon, but it's still there. I can feel it. The creature's massive head turned fully toward their ship. In those depths of darkness that served as eyes, Sarah saw something that made her heart leap with hope. Recognition, understanding. And underneath the pain and fear, something else, entirely. Gratitude. The shadow worm's weapon systems shut down completely. Its tortured movements became smoother, more purposeful. And then, to the amazement of everyone aboard the Harmony, the creature began to sing. The song was deep and resonant, transmitted through subspace frequencies that made the ship's hull vibrate gently. It was a song of loneliness that had lasted centuries, of forced violence against its nature, and of sudden, impossible hope, that someone finally understood. "My God," Dr. Webb whispered. "It's working. The creature is breaking free from hive control." But their celebration was short-lived. Throughout the hive fleet, alarms were sounding as the collective consciousness realized it was losing control of one of its most powerful weapons. Bioships began converging on their position. And worse, they were bringing reinforcements, more enslaved creatures being driven by increased hive control. "Captain," Commander Reese reported grimly, "we've got company incoming, multiple hostiles. And they don't look like they're in the mood for conversation." Sarah looked at the approaching threat, then at the shadow worm that was still singing its song of newfound freedom. The creature had trusted her, had broken free from torment that had lasted longer than human civilization. She couldn't abandon it now. "Then we'd better make some more friends, fast," Sarah said, activating the communications array again. "Because I have a feeling our new friend here is going to need all the help it can get." As the hive fleet closed in around them, Sarah began speaking to the other enslaved creatures, her voice carrying hope across the darkness of space. Behind her, Cosmos hummed in harmony with the shadow worm's song. And for the first time in the conflict, the balance of power began to shift. The real battle was just beginning. But for the first time, humanity's unique gift might be enough to change the course of galactic history. The space around the scout ship Harmony erupted into chaos as 6 hive bioships converged on their position. Each vessel was a nightmare of organic architecture, their hulls pulsing with veins and breathing apparatus, weapon ports that looked disturbingly like mouths lined with teeth. Behind them came more enslaved creatures, a pack of dimensional wraiths that phased in and out of normal space. And something that Dr. Webb's instruments couldn't even classify, a mass of tentacles and fury that defied geometric description. But the shadow worm that Sarah had freed positioned itself protectively between the Harmony and the approaching threats. Its massive form coiled around the small ship like a living shield, and its song changed from one of gratitude to one of defiance. The creature that had been forced to destroy for centuries was finally free to protect. "All bioships are powering weapons," Commander Reese reported, his knuckles white on the controls. "Sarah, whatever you're going to do, you need to do it fast." Sarah was already at the communication station, her voice broadcasting across every frequency as she reached out to the approaching creatures. "I know you can hear me through the hive's control," she said, her words carrying across the vacuum with desperate urgency. "I know you're trapped inside your own bodies, forced to hurt people when all you want is freedom." One of the dimensional wraiths flickered into full reality near their ship. It was a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline structure, its light pulsing with the rhythm of a heartbeat. But that light was tainted with dark tendrils, the visible manifestation of hive control. "You're scared," Sarah continued, watching the creature through the viewport. "You've been scared for so long that you've forgotten what peace feels like. But I remember being scared too. When I was little, I was afraid of the dark, afraid of being alone. But then I learned that fear goes away when you realize you're not really alone." The wraith's energy patterns began to fluctuate. The dark tendrils of hive control wavered as something deeper fought against them. Dr. Webb was monitoring multiple sensor streams simultaneously. "The creature's quantum signature is destabilizing. It's fighting the hive matrix. But the control mechanisms are too deeply embedded. It needs more help than just words." That's when Cosmos, the Void Stalker, did something unexpected. The ethereal creature moved to the ship's external docking hatch and began to phase through the hull. Before anyone could stop it, Cosmos was floating in space itself, its form stabilized by some impossible physics that allowed it to survive in the vacuum. "Cosmos, no!" Sarah cried. But the Void Stalker was already moving toward the struggling wraith. The meeting between the two creatures was unlike anything any of them had ever witnessed. Cosmos extended part of its shadowy form toward the wraith. And when they touched, both beings exploded with light. The dark tendrils of hive control around the wraith began to dissolve, burned away by the pure connection between two free souls. "Incredible," Dr. Webb breathed. "The Void Stalker is somehow severing the neural connections that the hive uses for control." "But how?" Sarah understood immediately. Cosmos knows what it's like to be misunderstood, to be feared when all you want is friendship. It's showing the Wraith that there's another way to exist. The freed Wraith's light shifted from the tainted glow of forced servitude to a brilliant, pure radiance. It began to sing, its voice joining the shadow worms in a harmony that resonated through subspace. And that harmony had an unexpected effect on the other enslaved creatures. The massive tentacled horror stopped its advance, its form writhing as internal conflicts played out across its alien features. The other creatures began to slow, their attack patterns becoming erratic as the song of freedom reached parts of their consciousness that the hive couldn't fully control. "It's working," Lieutenant Morrison said with amazement. "The song is acting like some kind of liberation frequency," but Sarah knew they needed to do more. She opened a direct communication channel to every creature in the area and began to speak again. This time with Cosmos's experience guiding her words. "I can feel your loneliness," she said, her voice carrying new depth and understanding. "Cosmos showed me what it's like to be the only one of your kind, to be feared by everyone you meet. But you don't have to be alone anymore. None of us do." She thought of every abandoned animal she had ever rescued, every frightened creature she had coaxed from hiding with patience and love. But now she was reaching across species barriers that had never been crossed, speaking to intelligences that had evolved in the deepest parts of space where no light had ever shone. "You're all beautiful," she continued, and somehow she meant it. Even the most nightmarish creatures were beautiful to her in that moment, because she could see past their fearsome appearances to the trapped souls beneath. "You're all worthy of love and friendship. The hive told you that violence was your only nature. But that's a lie. You can choose something different." One by one, the creatures began to break free. The tentacled horror's movements became graceful instead of violent, its alien intelligence asserting itself over hive programming. The dimensional wraiths multiplied the effect, their quantum nature allowing them to share the liberation frequency across vast distances instantaneously. But the hive bioships weren't finished. As their living weapons turned against them, the ships themselves began to transform. Their organic hulls split open to reveal the true horror within. The hive nodes themselves, the central consciousness that had enslaved countless species across the galaxy. Each node was a grotesque fusion of organic and cybernetic components, a brain the size of a building surrounded by neural networks that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. They communicated with each other through bursts of electromagnetic energy, coordinating their response to this unprecedented threat to their control. "The hive nodes are adapting," Dr. Webb warned. "They're increasing the control signals to the remaining enslaved creatures. And they're targeting our ship directly." Energy beams lanced out from the bioships, not the wild organic weapons Sarah had expected, but precisely calibrated attacks designed to destroy the source of the liberation frequency. Commander Reese threw the harmony into evasive maneuvers, but the small scout ship couldn't outrun purpose-built warships indefinitely. That's when the freed creatures made their choice. The shadow worm coiled itself into a defensive spiral around the harmony, its massive body absorbing energy blasts that would have vaporized the smaller ship. The dimensional wraiths began phasing the ship in and out of normal space, making it impossible for the hive to maintain targeting locks. And the tentacled creature, which had seemed so monstrous moments before, extended part of itself to create a living shield array. "They're protecting us, Lieutenant," Morrison said with wonder. "These creatures are choosing to fight their former masters." But Sarah could see that the battle was far from over. More bioships were arriving, bringing fresh, enslaved creatures under tighter control. The hive was learning to adapt to their liberation techniques, developing counter-frequencies that made it harder for creatures to break free. "We need to reach the hive nodes directly," she realized. "As long as they exist, they'll just enslave more creatures to replace the ones we've freed." The problem was that the nodes were protected by layers of bioships and enslaved guardians. No conventional assault could reach them, and even their freed allies couldn't get close enough to the heart of the hive fleet. Dr. Webb was studying his sensor readings with growing excitement. "Sarah, I'm detecting something unusual. The node's communication system, it's not just transmitting control signals, it's also receiving sensory input from all the enslaved creatures. It experiences everything they experience." "What are you thinking?" Sarah asked. "What if we could reverse the flow? Instead of the node controlling the creatures, what if the creatures could share their experience of freedom with the node?" It was a radical idea. Instead of trying to destroy the hive consciousness, they would try to convert it. But to do that, they would need to get close enough to establish a direct connection. And that meant getting through the entire hive fleet. "Cosmos," Sarah called to the Voidstalker, which was still floating in space nearby. "Can you phase us through their defenses the same way you phase through walls?" The ethereal creature's form rippled with what might have been excitement. It moved back toward the ship, its shadowy substance beginning to envelope the Harmony's hull. "This is either brilliant or completely insane," Commander Reese muttered, as his instruments registered the ship's entire structure beginning to shift into a state between dimensions. "Both," Sarah replied. "But that's what makes it human." The Harmony, now partially phased thanks to Cosmos's influence, began to slip through the hive fleet like a ghost ship. Bioships tried to intercept them, but their weapons passed harmlessly through the shifted vessel. Enslaved creatures moved to block their path, only to have the ship phase past them as if they weren't there. As they approached the largest hive node at the center of the fleet, Sarah could feel its presence like a weight on her mind. This was the source of centuries of suffering. The intelligence that had turned countless innocent creatures into instruments of destruction. But as they drew closer, she began to sense something else. The node wasn't just malevolent. It was lonely. Desperately. Horribly lonely. It had consumed other consciousnesses, not out of evil, but out of a desperate need to not be alone in the universe. Every creature it enslaved was, in its twisted logic, a friend that could never leave. "Oh," Sarah whispered, as understanding dawned. "You're not evil. You're just afraid of being alone." She opened a communication channel directly to the hive node, but this time her voice carried compassion instead of defiance. "I know what it's like to be alone," she said. "I know what it's like to be so desperate for connection that you'd do anything to keep someone close. But forcing creatures to stay with you isn't friendship. Real friendship means letting them choose to be with you." The node's response was a blast of confused emotions: anger, fear, desperate justification for its actions. It couldn't understand how connection could exist without control. "Let me show you," Sarah said. Working together with Cosmos and their freed allies, Sarah began to share something unprecedented with the hive node. The experience of genuine friendship, the shadow worm's gratitude for being freed, the dimensional wraith's joy in choosing to help protect others, Cosmos's deep contentment in having found someone who understood its true nature. The node's consciousness recoiled from these alien emotions, but they were being transmitted through its own neural networks, carried by the very creatures it had enslaved. For the first time in its existence, the hive mind experienced what its victims felt when they chose to trust, to love, to sacrifice for others, without being forced to. The change was immediate and dramatic. Throughout the fleet, enslaved creatures began breaking free as the node's control signals shifted from commands to questions. "What do you want to do? Where would you like to go? How can I help you be happy?" The bioships themselves began to transform as the hive consciousness redirected its vast intelligence from conquest to cooperation. Weapon systems became communication arrays. Breeding chambers became comfortable habitats for willing symbionts. The entire fleet shifted from an instrument of war to something unprecedented in galactic history. A mobile sanctuary for the lost and misunderstood. "This is impossible, Doctor," Webb said, watching as his sensors registered the transformation of an entire galactic menace into something benevolent. "A collective consciousness doesn't just change its fundamental nature overnight. It does if it was never truly evil to begin with," Sarah replied. "Sometimes the scariest monsters are just people who have forgotten how to love properly." Months later, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the expanded Coalition Council chambers, watching as representatives from dozens of species formally welcomed the newest members of their alliance. The creatures that had once been the galaxy's most feared predators now served as protectors and guardians. Their unique abilities used to help rather than harm. The former hive node, now calling itself the Collective, had become the galaxy's most effective rescue and rehabilitation service. Bioships that had once carried death now carried aid to disaster-stricken worlds. Creatures that had been instruments of destruction became healers and protectors. Ambassador Veltar approached Sarah as the ceremony concluded. His skin showed colors of deep respect and wonder. Captain Chen, the Department of Human-Creature Relations has received formal requests from 47 different species to help them establish better relationships with the predator species in their own systems. It seems your gift is needed throughout the galaxy. Sarah smiled, looking out at the diverse gathering of beings that filled the chambers. Cosmos was visible near the viewing windows, playing some sort of complex game with a group of young Chronari. The shadow worm they had first freed was coiled peacefully in a specially designed rest area, surrounded by beings who would have fled in terror from it months before. "It's not a gift," Sarah said quietly. "It's just understanding that everyone wants the same thing: to be loved, to be understood, to belong somewhere. Humans just learned early that sometimes the scariest things need the most love." Dr. Webb joined them, his tablet showing data streams from across the galaxy. "The transformation is accelerating," he reported. "Species that have been in conflict for centuries are learning to communicate instead of fight. Predator-prey relationships are becoming cooperation partnerships. Sarah, I think you fundamentally changed how the galaxy understands the nature of consciousness and connection." But Sarah was watching something else. A small Etherian child who was nervously approaching one of the former hive creatures, a being that resembled a walking tangle of thorns and shadows. The creature noticed the child's fear and slowly, carefully, shifted its form to become smaller, less threatening. When the child finally worked up the courage to touch one of its tendrils, the creature's entire being seemed to glow with happiness. "No," Sarah said softly. "We haven't changed anything fundamental. We've just reminded everyone of what they already knew, but had forgotten. Every creature in the galaxy, no matter how different or frightening, just wants to be someone's friend." As the celebration continued around them, Sarah felt a familiar presence at her side. Cosmos had materialized beside her, its form now stable and warm, shot through with colors that spoke of contentment and belonging. The Void Stalker that had once been considered one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators now served as an ambassador between species, its unique abilities helping others learn to cross the barriers that had divided them. "Come on. Beautiful," Sarah said to her ethereal companion. "We've got a galaxy full of misunderstood creatures to meet, and something tells me they're all just waiting for someone to show them that they're not as scary as everyone thinks." As they walked through the station's corridors together, past beings from 100 different worlds who no longer looked at each other with fear, but with curiosity and hope, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. Humanity had come to the stars, looking for their place in a vast and often hostile galaxy. What they had found instead was that their place was wherever someone needed a friend. And in a galaxy full of creatures that had been misunderstood for millennia, that meant their place was everywhere. The age of human diplomacy had begun not with treaties or trade agreements, but with a simple truth that somehow only humans had remembered. Every monster is just someone who needs a hug, and in a galaxy full of monsters, humans had found their true calling at last.